Intuitively, I think the sort of intuitive argument about which I've written rather a lot, which seems to be embraced here, is what I call the born that way argument. This is now outside of the constitutional context, but just a sort of intuitive ethical argument that I think that many people find plausible, which is sort of lurking in the background of this equal protection argument. The idea is sexual orientations are prenatally determined or not a choice in some way. It's wrong to discriminate against people or otherwise or punish people for something that is an accident of birth. Therefore, it's wrong to punish or discriminate against lesbians, gay men, and bisexuals if, in fact, because those things are innate or immutable. That's the intuitive argument that we shouldn't, if you're born that way, you shouldn't be punished or discriminated against because of it. And that, I think, is the idea that is sort of implicit in some of this equal protection analysis. Now, so I wanted to say something, but not a lot, about the empirical claim. Why? Because this would be a really bad argument. This would be total non-starter if we didn't think there was some reason for buying the empirical premise. I'm not going to make up an empirical premise that was completely implausible, and then you wouldn't be tempted by this intuitive argument. So there's some studies out there that suggest that sexual orientations are strongly biological and either inborn or determined at an early age. There's the 1991 study of the interstitial nuclei of the anterior hypothalamus by Simon LeVay. There's a series of twin studies. The earliest one were Bailey and Pillar's twin studies that show that, or that claim to show that identical twins, one of whom is gay, are much more likely that if one identical twin is gay, then it's very likely that the other identical twin is gay, much more so than in the case of fraternal or adopted siblings. Hamer did a gene linkage study that looked at the genetic familiarity of homosexuality, and then there's some other studies about auditory responses in lesbians, the direction of your hair whirl in gay men, fingerprint studies, a whole bunch of other studies that are supposed to sort of add up to this unified theory that sexual orientations are strongly biological and either inborn or determined at an early age. And sort of based on this research, we think, okay, well, not only is this argument intuitive, but its empirical premise is plausible. And again, that's why I think that this, both the intuitive, born that way argument, the ethical argument seems plausible, seems promising, and its constitutional version, as presented by although here the Washington Supreme Court rejects it because they say there's no evidence for the first empirical premise. Now, my own view is that the scientific research is terrible. We have that it's all riddled with a bunch of methodological problems and bad science. I just have on the slide some of my standard criticisms of this. First of all, it starts with a simplistic account of what sexual orientations are. So, for example, LeVay's study, the way he determines his subjects for his brain study were actually just pieces of brains that had medical files attached to them. They were pieces of brains from people who died from complications of HIV. And if they were HIV positive and they had indicated that their risk factor was sexual activity with people of the same sex, he called them gay. And if they were HIV positive and didn't include that as a risk factor, he called them straight. And he looked at the size of certain regions of the brain on the basis of that. But that's an account of what a sexual orientation is that focuses simply on behavior or on self-identification about behavior. He simply lumped bisexuals in with gay men and so forth. And so that's just one. Again, all of the research begins with a very simplistic, either behavioral or self-identification model of what a sexual orientation is. It also makes a series of unjustified assumptions about the percentages of gay, lesbian, and bisexual people in the population, based on problematic analogies between sexual orientations in humans and in ants. I mean, in animals. Sometimes even fruit flies. No, I was getting to this because there's a study in fruit flies. There's even a fruit fly gene variation which they call fruity, which is if there's a certain mutation there that fruit fly becomes oriented in a certain way to other male fruit flies. And so then this is actually, I'm not making this up, this is used as a model of human sexual orientation. It just shows how absurd it is. But there's also the lesbian seagulls study about them, which also suggests that if this is the model of human sexual orientation, that something is wrong, it's overly simplistic. And then a more sophisticated criticism is that the research begins with the assumption that gay men are in some way, some biological way, female-like, and that lesbians are in some way male-like. And that's sort of the starting point of the research project. So there's in 5 seconds or in 2 minutes, whatever that was, a summary of some of the main criticisms with the sort of research. So on my view, we actually don't have strong reason for embracing the empirical premise of the born that way argument. Now, a little bit about how this connects up to the issue of natural human kinds. So there's a debate which used to be quite trendy within LGBT studies between essentialism and social constructionism. One version of this argument is, were there homosexuals and heterosexuals in other cultures, like in ancient Greece, for example? And the thought is, or does it make sense to apply our terms, gay, straight, bi, etc., to other contemporary cultures? And the thought was that essentialists say, yes, we can. If these are biological terms or natural humankind terms, there's no problem applying them to other cultures, even if, say, the ancient Greeks didn't have our concepts of heterosexual, homosexual, and bisexual, but had some other concepts. It's perfectly fine for us to apply our concepts to them because our concepts are the right concepts. Ours are the objective scientific terms, and it's okay to apply them to other cultures. That's what the essentialists would say on this picture. And the social constructionists would say, no, no, no. We can't apply our terms. That would just be like applying the term, say, were they a member of the Democratic Party, or was Socrates a hippie? It's a sort of culturally specific term that we can't apply to other cultures. Was Socrates a hippie? Was he a yuppie? That just is a conceptually confused question. That's taking a socially constrained category and trying to apply that to other cultures.